He vowed to never love her. She fled, only to be found tending the sick during a deadly plague. It was then, in the face of death, that a duchess's secret note, and one night of her profound kindness, undid him completely. Witness the extraordinary journey of a duke's heart, from hardened pride to profound affection, all thanks to an unspoken message. The chamber glowed with too many candles, each flame trembling against the velvet drapes, as though even fire itself was nervous for what was to come. Lady Evelina Harcourt, no, not Harcourt anymore, Duchess Blackthorne, sat at the edge of a grand bed covered in silks she had never dared imagine in her girlish dreams. The satin of her gown pooled around her, a small ocean of white stitched with pearls. Her pulse thundered. She pressed her palms together, then apart again, restless, uncertain. All her life, she had been told this moment would define her. Your wedding night seals your fate, her mother once whispered when she was still a girl in ribbons. Tonight was meant to be that promise, fulfilled. Outside, the manor was hushed. The last of the guests had departed hours ago. The carriages had rattled into the misty night, and the champagne laughter of nobles had faded into silence. Yet here, in this chamber, anticipation lingered like a perfume too strong to breathe. Evelina's chest tightened. She had not wanted to marry Adrian Blackthorne, not at first. He was too distant, too feared, too much like a figure carved from ice. But when her father announced the match, her heart had tried to cling to hope. Perhaps his distance hid depths. Perhaps she would be the one to warm him. Girls raised on duty often spun fantasies to survive their lot, and Evelina had spun hers around the Duke. Her lips curled in the faintest smile at the memory of the hour earlier that day. Candlelight reflected against the stained glass of the chapel. Hundreds of eyes watched as she walked forward. Adrian had stood waiting, tall, severe, his features so perfectly chiseled he looked more myth than man. He hadn't smiled, but he had taken her hand firmly, and that had been enough to make her heart leap. Perhaps, she whispered to herself now, tracing the satin of her skirts, perhaps tonight he will see me. The door opened. The sound was not gentle, it was a command. The great oak swung on iron hinges, and Adrian Blackthorne entered as though the world bent around him. He was still in the remnants of his wedding attire, his cravat slightly loosened, his black coat casting him as a shadow among candlelight. His dark eyes swept the room, cool and detached, before settling on her. Evelina rose, her heart racing. She smoothed her gown, her voice soft, tentative. "My lord." He stopped her with a glance. "I will be plain, Duchess," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and merciless. "Do not mistake this union for love. You will never have my heart." The words shattered through the chamber. Evelina's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world swayed around her. She gripped the carved bedpost as though the wood could keep her upright. "You cannot mean that," she whispered. "I mean every syllable." He removed his gloves with measured precision, each movement deliberate. "This marriage exists for duty, for name, for bloodline. Perform your role. Bear the title. But never believe affection lies within this bargain." Her throat constricted. She searched his face, those severe cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw, but found no softness there. "Why would you wound me so, on this night of all nights?" Her voice trembled despite her will. Adrian's gaze flickered, the faintest crack. "Because," he said, low, "hearts betray. And I will not be betrayed again." It was the only explanation he gave. He turned from her, unfastening his cravat, as though she were no more than a servant in the room. Evelina's chest ached as though a hand had gripped her heart and twisted. She wanted to scream, to beg, to demand his reason. But she had been raised to silence, to composure. Instead, she whispered, "You did not have to marry me." He paused at the mantel, where the fire hissed. His shoulders stiffened, then loosened again. "I did what duty required. Nothing more." Tears blurred her vision, though she willed them not to fall. She would not let him see her crumble. She thought back to earlier that day. The vows had felt heavy, but she had clung to them. The ring, cool on her finger, had seemed to promise something: connection, permanence. The way her father's proud smile had shone as she spoke her lines. The way the chapel had gasped when Adrian kissed her hand at the altar. She had believed there was a chance. Now, in the cold hush of this chamber, her hope collapsed. Adrian extinguished one of the candles, his movements casual, detached. The flame hissed into smoke, and the room seemed darker, colder. "You may rest here. I'll take my study." His voice held no room for debate. And with that, he left her. The door shut. Silence swallowed the chamber. Evelina stood frozen, staring at the space he had occupied. Her gown suddenly felt like a costume, heavy and suffocating. The roses in the room smelled too sweet, cloying, mocking. Her hands clenched at her sides. She felt as though every candle burned with eyes, watching her humiliation. Her heart cracked, but beneath the pain, something stirred: defiance. She gathered her skirts and left the chamber. The corridor stretched long, its stone walls cold against torchlight. Every step echoed her despair, her shame. Yet she walked faster, driven by a need she could not name. Her feet carried her to the chapel of Blackthorn Manor. The doors creaked open, revealing silence and moonlight. Stained glass fractured the silver light into blues and reds across the pews. The air smelled of wax, old wood, and faint incense. Evelina fell to her knees before the altar, her hands clasped, trembling. "If not his heart," she whispered, her voice breaking into the stillness, "then I shall claim my own dignity." The words were fragile, but they echoed through the stone hall as if the walls themselves bore witness. Her tears fell freely now, warm against her hands. Her body shook, her chest tight with grief. Yet in that moment of despair, she felt a strange flicker within her, a light not given by him, but by herself. She remained there as the bells tolled midnight, the sound echoing across stone. On the night she became a duchess, Evelina discovered she was also a woman abandoned. But this was not the end. This was the beginning. The knock on her chamber door came like a hammer against glass. Evelina startled awake, her cheek pressed to the pillow still damp from tears. Dawn had barely touched the horizon, yet the household was already alive with footsteps. "Your Grace." It was her maid, Alice, voice trembling with caution. "The Duke requests your presence in the solar." Requests. Evelina almost laughed. Nothing about Adrian Blackthorn sounded like a request. She rose, her body heavy, her heart heavier, and let Alice lace her into a pale blue gown. The fabric was fine, expensive, but Evelina felt as though she wore armor she had not chosen. By the time she reached the solar, sunlight was spilling across tall windows, setting fire to the dust motes dancing in the air. Adrian stood at the far end, back straight, a glass of brandy in his hand though the day had barely begun. His gaze met hers only briefly, sharp as a blade. "Your duties begin at once," he said. "No greeting, no apology, only orders. You will oversee the household accounts with Mrs. Kent. Appear in the village on market day. The Duchess's role is to be visible. Do you understand?" Her lips parted. She longed to ask if he remembered the words he had spoken last night, if he regretted them even for a heartbeat. But his eyes warned her silence was safer. "Yes, Your Grace." Something flickered across his face at the title. Satisfaction? Irritation? She could not tell. Later that morning, Evelina walked through the manor's bustling kitchens, trailing after Alice. The servants glanced at her with the curiosity of those who had long feared their master would never wed. Whispers followed her like ghosts. "Pretty, isn't she? Poor thing, the Duke is colder than the grave. Maybe she'll soften him. Or maybe she'll wither, like the last one." The words stung, though Evelina kept her chin high. Her mother's lessons echoed. A lady is grace even when the world cuts her down. Mrs. Kent, the housekeeper, greeted her with a stiff curtsy. "Your Grace, we've kept the household running to the Duke's standards. He is particular." Particular. Evelina suspected the word was a veil for merciless. Still, she bent to the task, asking questions, taking notes. If she could not have Adrian's heart, she would have his household. If she could not be wanted, she would at least be needed. That evening, she joined the Duke for supper. The table stretched long between them, polished silver reflecting candlelight. The silence was suffocating. Evelina toyed with her spoon, appetite absent. Finally, she dared. The villagers seemed fearful of the coming season. They spoke of illness spreading nearby. Adrian's fork paused midway. His gaze lifted, piercing her across the distance. You will not concern yourself with gossip. It did not sound like gossip. Evelina's voice was quiet, but firm. It sounded like fear. His jaw tightened. Fear spreads faster than any plague. Best you remember that. She met his stare, something sparking between them, defiance, or perhaps recognition. He was a man chained to his pride, and she, a woman tethered to her hope. For a moment, neither looked away. Days passed, and Evelina sought refuge in the village. She visited the baker, the seamstress, the old healer with hands gnarled like tree roots. Among the common folk, she found the warmth her husband denied her. They called her our duchess with shy smiles, and for a flicker of time, she felt she belonged. But whispers followed here too. They say the Duke keeps to his shadows. They say he buried his heart with the woman who betrayed him. They say he's cursed. Evelina pressed the words to her chest like hidden bruises. Each rumor was another puzzle piece of the man she had married. One evening, unable to keep silence any longer, she confronted him. Why do you hide yourself from your own people? Her voice carried across the drawing room, sharper than she had intended. Adrian looked up from his papers, brows lifting. You presume much. I only wish to understand. Understand. He stood, the firelight sharpening his features into something almost cruel. You think because we share vows, you are owed my soul. You know nothing of what I've lost. Then tell me. Evelina's plea slipped free before she could stop it. Tell me, so I may at least know the man I have been bound to. His hands clenched at his sides. For a heartbeat, he looked as though he might. The silence quivered with it. But then he turned away. Go to bed, Duchess. Leave me to my ghosts. That night, Evelina lay awake long after the candles burned low. She thought of his words, of the hollowness in his voice when he spoke of loss. Somewhere beneath that cold shell lived a wound still bleeding. She pressed her palm to her chest. If not his heart, then I shall guard my own. And perhaps, in time, I will uncover the truth he hides. The next morning, she walked with Alice in the gardens. Frost clung to the last roses, their petals bruised by the season's bite. Evelina brushed one lightly, thinking of herself, lovely in bloom, yet fragile under winter's hand. Alice hesitated before speaking. Forgive me, Your Grace, but the Duke was not always so. When his mother died of fever, something in him broke. And later, she bit her lip. Later, there was another woman. She betrayed him, sold his trust for coin. Evelina's throat tightened. Betrayal. So that was the scar beneath his vow. She gazed at the frost-bitten roses, whispering, no wonder he buried his heart. But even frozen roses could thaw beneath the right light. That evening, Evelina crossed paths with Adrian in the gallery. Moonlight pooled through tall windows, painting him in silver. He halted when he saw her. For once, he did not look past her. He looked at her. You walk the halls late, Duchess. I could say the same of you, my lord. A faint curve touched his mouth, not quite a smile, but not disdain either. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed the man he might be, if only he would let himself breathe. They stood in silence, the air thick between them. Her heart thudded, reckless, hopeful. But then he stepped back, retreating into shadow. Good night, Evelina. Her name on his lips was softer than anything he had given her yet. She carried it with her, like a candle against the dark. In the days that followed, Evelina wove herself into the lives of the people, visiting the sick child of a seamstress, bringing bread to a hungry widow, listening to the old healer speak of herbs and remedies. Her compassion became whispered legend, the Duchess who cared. But with every act, Adrian's gaze grew darker, more conflicted. He watched her as though she were a fire, dangerous, mesmerizing, impossible to ignore. One night, after she returned mud-streaked from the village, he confronted her. "You defy me," he said, voice taut. "I told you to stay clear of gossip and squalor." "And I told you it was not gossip," Evelina shot back. Her voice did not shake this time. "It is need. Your people are afraid. They require more than titles. They require a hand, a heart." His jaw hardened. "And you think you can provide what I cannot?" She lifted her chin. "Yes." Silence crashed between them. His stare burned, torn between fury and something far more dangerous, respect. Finally, he said, low and raw, "You play a perilous game, Duchess." And then he left her standing there, heart racing, cheeks aflame, knowing she had crossed a line she could never uncross. That night, as she lay in bed, Evelina whispered into the dark, "If I cannot have his love, I will give mine where it is most needed. And perhaps, one day, he will see." The bell tolled in the village square, not once but thrice, a warning Evelina had never heard before. She froze at the manor window, the sound cutting through the brittle morning air. Then came the riders, mud-splattered men shouting up the lane. "The fever has spread. Lock your gates. Lock your homes." Her stomach dropped. Alice gasped behind her, clutching the frame of the window. Moments later, Adrian stormed into the corridor, boots striking stone. His face was carved in steel. "You will not step beyond these walls." His command was final, as if the tolling bells themselves obeyed him. Evelina's heart pounded. "But the village is not your concern," he snapped. "Do you hear me? You will stay here. You will not risk yourself." Her fingers curled into her skirts. The image of the seamstress's child, frail, coughing, rose before her eyes. The villagers who had smiled at her, who had called her our duchess. Her people. She could not ignore them. That night, when the manor slept, Evelina lit a single candle and slipped from her chamber. The hallways were dark, every creak of the floor echoing her betrayal. At the stables, the horses snorted softly, their warm breath misting the air. Alice was waiting, a cloak in her hands. "You'll be the death of me," Alice whispered, fastening the clasp beneath Evelina's chin. "But if you're going, you won't go alone." The village smelled of smoke and fear. Fires burned at crossroads to keep spirits, or sickness, at bay. Evelina pressed her hand to her nose, but the stench of fever, sweat, and despair clung to everything. She entered the seamstress's cottage first. Inside, a child whimpered on a straw bed, cheeks flushed scarlet, lips cracked. Evelina knelt, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. The mother wept silently, clutching Evelina's skirts. "You should not be here," the woman sobbed. "If the Duke finds—" "Let him find," Evelina whispered. "No child should suffer alone." By dawn, word had spread. The Duchess had come to the fever wards. Villagers bowed their heads, some in gratitude, others in disbelief. She moved from cottage to cottage, washing brows, fetching water, comforting mothers. Her hands blistered from work, but she did not stop, until the shadow of a horse blocked her path. Adrian sat astride, black coat stark against the pale morning mist. His expression was thunder. "Go back to the manor." His voice cut the air like a blade. Evelina straightened, sweat beading at her brow. "No." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A duchess defying her duke. Adrian dismounted in a single swift motion, his boots sinking into mud. He seized her wrist, not cruelly but firmly. His eyes blazed. "You will obey me." Evelina's voice cracked with the force of her defiance. "If I cannot have your heart, I will give mine to them." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. His grip loosened, his jaw tense. And in that silence, she saw it, admiration, buried deep, fighting to break free. But he turned away, dragging her toward his horse. Enough. The villagers watched as the Duke led his Duchess back, whispers rising like sparks. In the manor, he rounded on her. "Do you know what you risked?" His voice was a storm, his hand slamming against the table. "Your life, your title, your dignity, gone in a single night of reckless folly. Her chest heaved. And what of theirs? What is a duchess if she hides behind stone while her people die? He stared at her, breathing hard, his fury laced with something she could not name. His lips parted, then closed again, as though words warred inside him. Finally, he growled, "You will remain here. If you defy me again, I will." His voice broke, sharp with something almost like fear. "I will not lose another." Evelina's heart jolted. Another? The shadow of a past loss lingered in his words. But before she could ask, he strode from the room, leaving her alone with the fire that would not die in her chest. The next days blurred. Evelina obeyed outwardly, staying within the manor. But her mind burned with images of the sick, the children, the desperate mothers. She paced her chambers, restless. One evening, she found herself at the window of the great hall, watching Adrian. He spoke with his steward in low tones, but she caught fragments: supplies, physicians, coin. A realization struck her. He was already helping, quietly, in secret. Why hide it? Why bury compassion beneath pride? The question gnawed at her until she sought him out. She found him in his study, the room cloaked in shadows and brandy-scented air. "You send physicians," she said, stepping inside. "You fund their work. Why hide it?" He stiffened, his quill pausing above parchment. Slowly, he looked at her. "Because compassion," he said, voice low, "is a weapon to those who would use it against me. You do not know what it is to be betrayed by the one you trusted most." Her heart clenched. "Then let me in. Let me share the burden. You do not have to carry it alone." Silence stretched. His eyes locked on hers, hard yet yearning. For one fragile moment, the air between them burned with possibility. But then he turned away. "Leave me, Evelina." She did not. Instead, she crossed the room, laying her hand on the back of his chair. The heat of his body radiated through her skin. "Adrian," she whispered, daring his name. He inhaled sharply, the sound raw. His hand rose, as if to cover hers, but stopped midway. He curled it into a fist instead. "Do not," he said hoarsely. "Do not offer me what I cannot take." Her breath caught, her pulse fluttering. For the first time, she saw him not as the Duke, but as a man bleeding from an old wound. And in that moment, she vowed she would find a way to heal it. That night, she returned to her chamber, sleep far from her. She paced, her mind a storm of questions. What betrayal haunted him? What woman had broken him so completely he would chain his heart in ice? She pressed her palm to the window, staring at the distant lights of the village. "If he will not show them his heart, then I will show them mine. And perhaps, one day, he will see." The tolling of bells echoed again in the night, louder this time, carrying dread on the wind. The plague was closer now. And Evelina knew, this was only the beginning. The sound of Evelina's body hitting the ground was muffled by mud. She had collapsed in the fever ward, her vision swimming, the cries of children and the smell of sickness clawing at her senses. Her limbs refused to move, and the world tilted into darkness, until arms, strong and unyielding, lifted her from the earth. "Foolish woman," Adrian's voice thundered against her ear, ragged with fury, raw with something she had never heard before: fear. "Do you mean to kill yourself?" Her lashes fluttered open. His face hovered above hers, shadowed by firelight from the burning torches around the ward. His jaw clenched as if each breath cost him, his eyes blazing with something hotter than anger. He carried her as though she weighed nothing, striding past the stunned villagers. Gasps followed them, whispers chasing their heels. "The Duke carries his duchess." Evelina's lips trembled. "They need me." "You need saving," he snapped, pulling her closer, though his voice broke around the edges. "And I will not watch you die." Back at the manor, Adrian placed her gently on the bed, though his hands shook with restrained emotion. Alice fluttered about, bringing cloths and water, but Adrian waved her away. He sat beside Evelina himself, his broad frame hunched, his usually steady hands cooling her brow. "You risk everything for people who would bow and forget you the moment you fall," he muttered, though his thumb brushed a tear from her cheek before he could stop himself. Evelina caught his wrist, weak but unyielding. I do it, because someone must. If I can bring even one child comfort, if I can save one mother from grief, then I will not regret it. His eyes closed briefly, the muscles in his jaw twitching. When he opened them again, the storm had not lessened, but it had shifted. You will be the death of me, Evelina. In the days that followed, Adrian kept his vow to remain by her side whenever she ventured to the village. At first, he claimed it was to protect her reputation. But each night in the plague wards, she saw the cracks forming in his armor. He barked orders at physicians, yet stayed longer than needed to see the sick tended. He scolded Evelina for exhaustion, yet wrapped his cloak around her shoulders when he thought she wasn't watching. He glared at villagers, yet his gaze lingered on the smallest gestures of gratitude they offered her. And beneath the tension between them, something grew. One evening, as rain lashed the rooftops of the village, Evelina bent over a dying boy, her hands trembling as she sponged his fevered skin. His breathing rattled, shallow, desperate. She whispered soothing words, her heart breaking with every rasping breath. Adrian crouched beside her, his large hand covering hers on the cloth. She glanced at him, startled by the rare softness in his eyes. You cannot save them all, he murmured. Then I will save the ones I can, she whispered back. For a moment, their hands remained together, joined over the child's frail chest. Thunder rumbled, and with it, the air between them crackled, something fierce, something forbidden, something undeniable. The boy's breath steadied, shallow but stronger. Evelina exhaled a prayer, and Adrian's gaze never left her face. The next morning, scandal spread like wildfire. The duchess in the plague wards. One noblewoman sneered at market. Kneeling in mud, cradling fever-ridden children, what disgrace. Another man scoffed. She will drag the duke's name into ruin. Adrian overheard every whisper as he escorted Evelina through the crowd. His hand tightened on her arm, his glare silencing wagging tongues. Yet when Evelina dared glance at him, his face was unreadable, caught between fury and something far more dangerous, pride. Back in the carriage, silence stretched. Evelina's pulse raced. She braced for his wrath. Instead, his voice came low, taut. Do you realize what you have done? She lifted her chin, though her hands trembled in her lap. Yes. I showed them that a duchess's worth is not measured in gowns or titles, but in compassion. His eyes burned into hers. You make me weak. No, she whispered, leaning forward before courage could abandon her. I make you human. The air thickened, charged. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingered, before he tore it away, fists clenching. You are reckless, he growled, though his voice was hoarse. Reckless, and yet, he cut himself off, turning his face to the window. But Evelina had heard it. And yet, that night, she collapsed again, this time not from illness but from sheer exhaustion. Adrian found her slumped against a chapel pew, still wearing her mudded cloak, her face pale with fatigue. He knelt before her, lifting her gently. Stubborn, foolish woman, he whispered, his forehead pressing briefly to hers as if the contact might lend her his strength. His voice cracked. What am I to do with you? Her lashes fluttered. For the first time, she thought she heard not anger but pleading. The following days were an unspoken battle. Evelina continued to serve in the plague wards. Adrian continued to shadow her steps, torn between fury and awe. Each quarrel was sharper, each silence heavier, each accidental brush of hands like fire to dry kindling. And the villagers noticed. They whispered of the duchess's courage, but also of the duke's gaze when he watched her. The man once thought colder than death now carried his wife in his arms, now followed her into sickness, now lingered too close. One night, Evelina awoke in the manor to find Adrian standing at her bedside. His coat hung heavy with rain, his hair damp, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. He stared at her as though she were a vision he could not decide was salvation or ruin. Why do you do it? He asked, voice raw. Why do you give yourself to those who will never repay you? She sat up slowly, heart thundering. Because I know what it is to long for someone to care. He inhaled sharply, stepping closer, as if drawn by a force he could no longer fight. His hand hovered above hers on the blanket, trembling as if the simple act of touching her might undo him completely. The silence stretched, his breath ragged, hers caught. But before their hands could meet, a knock shattered the moment. "My lord," a servant called from beyond the door. "Word from the village. More have fallen ill." Adrian's hand withdrew, his mask slamming back into place. "Stay here," he ordered, voice like stone, before striding into the hall. Evelina pressed her palm where his had nearly touched, her heart aching with the ghost of warmth that might have been. The next day, she followed him into the village once more. Together they stood in the fever ward, their presence a strange contradiction. Cold duke, compassionate duchess. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted. He no longer barked only commands. He began to ask. He began to listen. And when she faltered beneath the weight of sorrow, he was there to steady her, his arm strong against her trembling frame. Still, danger brewed beyond sickness. In taverns and drawing rooms, whispers grew. The duchess courts scandal in plague-ridden huts. The duke indulges her recklessness. Their house will fall to ruin. Evelina heard the murmurs, but what stung most was the suspicion that Adrian heard them too, and that he might believe them. Late one night, as she walked the corridor to her chambers, she heard voices from the study. "She risks everything," Adrian's cousin was saying, sharp and cruel. "The ton calls her reckless. She will bring shame upon your name. Cast her aside before she drags you down." Evelina pressed a hand to her mouth, heart pounding. Silence followed, heavy as stone. Then Adrian's voice, low and furious. "She is my wife. Speak of her again, and I will see you gone from Blackthorn forever." Evelina staggered back, tears blurring her vision. His words cut and healed all at once. He would not cast her aside. He defended her. But in the quiet of her own chamber, she whispered to herself, "He will defend me, but will he ever love me?" The next day, the fever ward claimed another child. Evelina wept openly, holding the small body as the mother collapsed beside her. Adrian stood a step away, his face shadowed with grief he tried to hide. When Evelina finally looked up, her eyes raw, Adrian's hand came to her shoulder. His grip was steady, grounding. His voice, hoarse, almost broke. "You cannot carry this alone." Her breath shuddered. "Then help me." Their eyes met, and in that moment, it felt as though the world stilled, the sickness, the whispers, the distance, everything, reduced to the truth of two souls colliding, fighting against themselves, against fate, and yet drawn inexorably closer. The war between pride and compassion was not yet over, but the battle lines had blurred. The letter fell from Evelina's trembling hand, its seal broken, its words seared into her chest like fire. "The duchess carries the sickness. The duchess spreads death wherever she walks." Her name, her very name, was poison on the parchment, signed by a rival noble's hand but already flying across drawing rooms, salons, and scandal sheets. The door burst open. Adrian strode in, fury in every step, his coat billowing like storm clouds. He snatched the paper from the floor, scanned it, and cursed low under his breath. His gaze snapped to her, sharp, haunted. "They will ruin you," he growled. "They will ruin us." Evelina pressed her hands together to still their shaking. "I went to help the sick, Adrian. I gave them comfort. And now they will use it to strip me of dignity." His jaw tightened. He flung the letter into the fire, watching it curl into ash. The flames licked higher, shadows cutting hard lines across his face. "I warned you. I told you compassion is a weapon." Her throat burned. "And yet you hide yours. Why? Why bury your heart when you could use it to save them?" The question pierced him. His hand fisted at his side. "Because the last time I gave my heart, it was used to destroy me." Silence rang, heavy and raw. Evelina's breath caught. For the first time, the mask cracked completely. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me what was done to you." He turned away, pacing like a man hunted. His voice, when it came, was low, ragged. I loved her. Years ago, before duty caged me. She was not noble, but I thought. He cut himself off, raking a hand through his dark hair. I thought love made us equals. I opened every door to her. I trusted her with everything I was. And she sold it all, for coin, for whispers, for another man's bed. The words scraped from him like blood from an open wound. Evelina's chest tightened with sorrow. She saw him then, not the Duke, but a man broken and betrayed, building walls so high even his own heart suffocated inside them. Adrian, she breathed, stepping closer. You are not the betrayal. You are the one betrayed. His eyes closed, as if her words were too much to bear. Do not pity me. I don't. She reached, daring to place her hand against his chest, feeling the thunder of his heartbeat. I see you. His eyes flew open. The storm in them clashed with the flicker of something he had buried for years. His hand caught hers, not pushing away, not crushing, but holding. His voice was rough. You will unravel me. Then let yourself unravel, she whispered. The space between them crackled. His lips hovered above hers, hesitation warring with hunger. Then, with a sound half growl, half prayer, Adrian pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was fierce, desperate, a clash of pain and longing. Evelina clutched at his coat, feeling the fire she had dreamed of since the night of their vows. For the first time, his walls broke. For the first time, his heart reached for hers. But the moment shattered with a pounding at the door. My lord. A servant's voice, frantic. The Viscount of Eastmay spreads word. The Duchess herself carries the fever. They say Blackthorn House is cursed. Adrian tore himself from Evelina, his face pale with fury. Eastmay, he spat. The viper. Evelina touched her lips, breathless, trembling. Already the sweetness of his kiss was soured by the venom of scandal. Adrian strode to the window, fists clenched. He means to strip me of standing, to destroy what little power I have left. And he will use you to do it. Her heart hammered. Then let me fight beside you. Do not cast me aside, Adrian. Not now. His gaze snapped to her. For a heartbeat, conflict raged in his eyes. Duty against desire, pride against the woman who had just unraveled his vow. At last, his voice broke, hoarse with something deeper than rage. God help me, Evelina, you are all I have left. The next day, whispers clung to every corner of the estate. Nobles arrived with false concern, leaving behind veiled insults. Servants bowed too quickly, avoiding Evelina's eyes. But in the village, it was different. Mothers clasped her hands, children pressed against her skirts, men dipped their heads. Our Duchess, they murmured. The one who stayed with us. Adrian saw it. He saw how they looked at her, not with fear, but with reverence. He saw how they trusted her, how they believed in her. And it tore at him, because he commanded obedience, but she commanded love. That night, he returned to her chamber. You should know, he said, voice thick, that Eastmay will not stop. He will paint you a plague-bearer until all the ton believe it. Evelina met his gaze, her own steady. Then let us show them the truth. Together. For a long moment, Adrian only stared. Then, slowly, he nodded. The days that followed forged a strange partnership. Adrian and Evelina stood side by side in the fever wards, his presence silencing doubters, hers softening fear. She knelt beside the sick while he ordered supplies and doctors, their strengths weaving into something unbreakable. At night, in rare quiet, they spoke, not of duty, but of scars, of fears, of dreams they had once buried. Evelina confessed how she had longed, as a girl, for a marriage of affection, not just alliance. Adrian admitted he no longer believed such things possible. Until her. Each confession was a stone removed from the walls around his heart. Each touch, accidental or deliberate, lit fires neither could ignore. Yet the scandal brewed hotter. A forged letter appeared in the capital, claiming Evelina had infected half the village. Another rumor whispered she had borne a fevered child before marriage. Lies twisted into chains meant to choke them both. Adrian's fury burned brighter each day, but Evelina's calm defiance steadied him. One night, as they prepared to attend a gathering despite the whispers, Evelina adjusted her gloves with trembling hands. Adrian stepped behind her, his reflection looming in the mirror. "Do not fear them," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "Let them fear you." Her eyes met his in the glass. "And you? Do you fear me still?" His lips curved, faint, pained. "Every moment. Because you are the only one who could undo me." Evelina turned, her gloved hand pressing to his chest. "Then let yourself be undone." The carriage arrived. The moment broke. But when they entered the hall together, the crowd gasped. The Duke and Duchess, once whispered to be strangers, stood arm in arm. Whispers turned to stares, stares to questions. And for the first time, Adrian did not pull away. He kept Evelina at his side, his hand over hers, his gaze daring anyone to challenge what they saw. The battle had only begun. But Evelina knew this truth. She had his hand now. And slowly, surely, she was winning his heart. The cry shattered the stillness of night. Evelina jolted awake, heart racing, sweat slicking her palms before she even knew why. Alice burst into the chamber, face ashen, voice breaking. "My lady, it's you. They say you've brought the plague to the estate. The gates," she choked, tears spilling. "They've painted the words Duchess of Death across the very stones of Blackthorn." Evelina's chest caved in, the words lodging like glass in her lungs. She rose, her bare feet cold against the floor, and rushed to the window. Down below, the gates of the estate glowed with torchlight. Scrawled across the iron in crude chalk, in letters meant to shame and destroy, was the name meant to bind her forever. Duchess of Death. Her knees weakened. Alice caught her before she fell. By morning, the whispers had become a chorus. Servants looked away when she passed. Letters arrived from noble families, their words poisoned with pity and disdain. And in the great hall, Adrian paced like a lion in a cage, fury radiating off him. "They think they can destroy me through you," he growled, fists clenched. "They think to strip me of power, to make my name a curse. Eastmay has taken this war too far." Evelina stood near the hearth, her hands clasped tightly to hide their shaking. "And yet it is I they brand, Adrian. It is my face they spit upon, my name they scrawl in filth. Tell me, will you still defend me when society itself calls me a plague?" His head snapped to her, eyes blazing. "I will protect you. Protect me." The word cracked like lightning. "You lock me in rooms, you silence my voice, you hold me back as though I am a child to be shielded. But what I need is not a prison. I need a partner." The silence between them cut deeper than any blade. That night, Evelina could bear it no longer. While Adrian drowned himself in brandy and fury, she stole into the stables. Alice tried to stop her, pleading, but Evelina's eyes burned with a fire that no hand could quench. "If they call me Death," she whispered, fastening the cloak tight, "then let me at least bring comfort to the dying." She rode into the fever ward alone. The village had worsened. Smoke from funeral pyres choked the streets. Children whimpered in shadows, their bodies frail, their eyes glazed with fear. Evelina moved from bed to bed, her hands steady though her heart trembled. She pressed cool cloths to brows, whispered prayers, offered water to parched lips. By dawn, her body shook with exhaustion. By nightfall, fever licked at her skin. When Adrian found her, she was kneeling beside a child, her hands trembling as sweat poured down her neck. He lifted her into his arms, voice breaking. "Damn you, Evelina," he whispered fiercely, his lips at her temple. "Damn you for making me feel. Damn you for making me care." She blinked weakly up at him, tears shimmering in her lashes. "You swore I would never have your heart. And yet, it beats for me now." His throat tightened, his face contorted in agony. He pressed his lips to her damp hair, clutching her as though she were the only anchor in a storm meant to swallow him whole. "I cannot lose you," he rasped. "Not you. Not now." Her body sagged against him, her breath shallow. Fever claimed her. 4 days, she drifted between darkness and light. She saw flashes, the cold press of cloth on her brow, Adrian's shadow looming beside her bed, his voice breaking in prayers she had never thought he knew. "Take me instead," he whispered one night, his forehead pressed to her hand. "Do what you will, God, but leave her with me. Leave her." Her heart twisted in her fevered haze, but her lips could not form the words she longed to speak. In her delirium, she whispered his name. Over and over, her lips clung to it like a lifeline. And each time, Adrian flinched as though stabbed, then held her tighter. "You fight," he whispered. "You fight, Evelina. Because if you go, I am nothing." Outside, the estate roared with scandal. Eastmere declared to all who would listen that the Duchess had doomed Blackthorn. Pamphlets circulated, mocking Adrian as weak, bewitched by a reckless bride. But inside the manor, Adrian never left her side. He fed her broth with his own hands, wiped her brow with trembling fingers, held her through nights where her fevered body convulsed. And when he thought no one heard, he whispered, "I love you. God help me, I love you." On the 4th night, Evelina's fever broke. Her breath steadied, her body stilled. She blinked into the dim light of the chamber, her gaze finding Adrian collapsed in a chair beside her, his head bowed against her bed. His hand clutched hers like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice fragile. His head jerked up. His eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, met hers. Relief crashed across his face, raw and unguarded. He seized her hand, pressing it to his lips, his shoulders shaking. "You live," he choked. "Thank God, you live." Her fingers brushed his cheek. His stubble rasped against her palm. "I heard you," she whispered. "In the dark. I heard your heart, Adrian." He froze, eyes wide, as though she had reached into his chest and laid claim to the truth he had buried for years. "You cannot hide from me anymore," she murmured. "Not when your heart spoke louder than your pride." His lips trembled. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice hoarse with surrender, he whispered, "You are mine. My heart, my soul, my salvation. And I am yours, Evelina." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. She had risked everything, her body, her reputation, her life, and in the brink of death, she had won what she had once thought impossible. His love. Yet even in triumph, shadows lingered. Eastmare's lies still spread like poison. The nobles still whispered in their gilded halls. The gates of Blackthorn still bore the scroll of shame. Adrian held Evelina's hand, his gaze burning with new fire. "We will not bow to them. We will show them the truth. You saved lives, Evelina. You saved me. And I will burn the world before I let them take that from you." Their darkest hour had nearly broken them. But together, they had survived. And together, they would rise. The blade flashed in the candlelight, pressed against Adrian's throat. Evelina's scream tore through the great hall, shattering the stunned silence of gathered nobles. Eastmare's hand was steady, his eyes wild. "You think you've ruined me? You think one ledger will undo my name? I will cut the Blackthorn line at its throat before I let you stand above me." Adrian did not flinch. He met Eastmare's madness with cold, unyielding steel in his gaze. "Kill me, and the world will know you for the coward you are." But Evelina was already moving. She darted forward, skirts flying, her hand outstretched. "No." Her voice broke with desperation. "If you must have blood, take mine. But let him live." The hall gasped. Whispers swirled like smoke, scandal colliding with awe. The Duchess offering her life for the Duke. Such a thing was unheard of, unthinkable. Eastmare's laugh was jagged, cruel. How poetic. The Duchess of Death begging for mercy. His grip tightened. Adrian's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in fury. And then Adrian spoke, his voice low but resonant enough to still every tongue. "You dare touch her, and I swear you will not leave this hall alive." The standoff snapped when Adrian wrenched himself free, his hand striking Eastmare's wrist. The blade clattered to the floor. In a heartbeat, the Duke's fist collided with the Viscount's jaw. The hall erupted, nobles shrieking, guards rushing forward, torches flaring with sudden chaos. Evelina pressed back against the wall, her heart thundering as Adrian seized Eastmere by the collar, slamming him against the marble pillar. "You tried to destroy her," Adrian hissed, his voice carrying the weight of every scar he had buried. "You spread your poison, you smeared her name, you called her death. But she is life. She is love. And I will not allow you to breathe another word against her." He released Eastmere with a shove, sending him sprawling across the floor. The guards swarmed, dragging the disgraced Viscount away as the council roared with outrage and fear. Adrian turned, chest heaving, gaze locking onto Evelina. And in that moment, before all of society, before the world, he crossed the hall, took her trembling hand, and went down on one knee. "I swore you would never have my heart," he said, his voice breaking with raw devotion. "But I was wrong. You have had it from the moment you defied me, from the moment you showed me what true courage was. Evelina, you are my heart. Forever." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She cupped his face, her voice unsteady but fierce. "And you are mine. Always." The crowd murmured, some in shock, others in awe. What began as scandal had turned into something else entirely, something undeniable. The aftermath was chaos, yet victory. Eastmare's ledgers were read aloud, his crimes unveiled. Hoarding medicine, condemning villages, feeding his pockets while children starved. The council, once divided, turned against him. He was stripped of title and lands, cast into disgrace. And the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn, once whispered about with scorn, became something new. Symbols of strength, of unity, of defiance. But the true battle was not fought in the halls of power. It was fought in the fever wards, where Evelina and Adrian returned together. Side by side, they carried supplies, tended the sick, soothed the dying. Adrian, once aloof, now knelt in mud beside his wife, holding trembling hands, wiping brows, carrying bodies when needed. He no longer hid behind pride. He no longer cloaked his heart in silence. And the people saw. "Our Duchess saved us," they whispered. "Our Duke stood with her. They are ours." One night, after a long day in the wards, Adrian and Evelina walked back through the village, lantern light glowing around them. The air smelled of rain and smoke, yet also of something cleaner, hope. Evelina leaned into him, her body weary, her spirit full. "You changed today." He glanced down, his lips curving faintly. "No, you changed me." She smiled through her exhaustion. "And yet you let me." His arm tightened around her. "Because you were right. Love is not weakness. Love is the only strength worth having." She stopped him in the street, turning to face him beneath the lantern glow. Her hand rose to his cheek, her thumb brushing the scarred line of his jaw. "Say it again." His breath caught, his eyes softening, deepening. "I love you, Evelina Harcourt Blackthorn. More than breath, more than life, more than I ever thought I could love again." She kissed him then, not in secrecy, not in scandal, but openly, where the villagers could see and bear witness. And the cheer that rose around them was not one of gossip, but of triumph. At the manor, they found a moment of peace in the chapel where Evelina had once wept alone. She lit a single candle, its flame steady, unwavering. "Do you remember?" she whispered. "This was where I swore I would claim my dignity if not your heart." Adrian stepped behind her, his arms circling her waist, his lips brushing her hair. "And now," she smiled, tears shimmering, "now I have both." He turned her gently, lifting her hand to his lips. "You gave me life, Evelina. You gave me back what I thought I had lost forever. And I will spend every day proving worthy of it." The world outside still whispered, still judged, still tested. But within the walls of Blackthorn, love had been forged in fire and plague, in scandal and sacrifice. It had been tested, broken, mended, and now it burned brighter than any lie. And as Adrian and Evelina stood together in the chapel's candlelight, their hands entwined, their hearts bared, the future no longer felt like duty or doom. It felt like destiny. The chapel bells tolled, deep and resonant, not for death but for dawn. Evelina stood at the balcony of Blackthorn Manor, her hands gripping the stone rail, her eyes stinging with the sight below. The gates that had once borne the words Duchess of Death now shimmered with garlands of flowers, laid there by villagers in silent tribute. Roses, lilies, wild daisies, all carried a single message: our Duchess lives. Our Duchess loves. Her throat tightened. Just months ago, she had knelt in the manor's chapel, her heart shattered by Adrian's vow that she would never have his heart. And now the world itself had shifted. She had not only his heart, but the devotion of those who once doubted her. Behind her, the doors opened. She knew his footsteps before she turned. Adrian crossed the chamber, his presence filling it like storm and fire. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her back against him, his lips brushing the curve of her neck. "You should sleep," he murmured. His voice was hoarse, softened by the scars of battles both seen and unseen. "I cannot," she whispered, leaning into him. "I thought I would never be more than a shadow in this house. And now," she gestured to the flowers below, her tears spilling freely. "Now they honor me. They honor the woman who saved them." His grip tightened. "And they honor the woman who saved me." Later that morning, they descended into the great hall. Nobles had gathered, some still wary, others curious, all of them watchful. The scandal that once threatened to crush them now hovered like smoke, uncertain, waiting to be cleared. Adrian stood tall, his arm wrapped firmly around Evelina's. His voice thundered across the chamber, silencing the whispers. "You called her death," he said, his eyes blazing. "You scrawled her name in filth. You spread lies to strip her dignity. But she, my wife, my Duchess, gave her life to the sick when you cowered behind your walls. She did not bring death. She brought hope. She brought life. And if any man here dares speak otherwise, he will answer to me." The silence broke into murmurs, astonished, reverent. Evelina's cheeks burned, her heart swelling as Adrian turned to her, his eyes softer now. "You have my heart, Evelina. Not hidden, not broken, not withheld. Mine. Entirely. And I will proclaim it until the end of my days." Gasps rippled through the crowd. What began as scandal had transformed into legend. In the days that followed, change swept through Blackthorn. The villagers, once fearful, began to walk taller, knowing their Duke and Duchess had fought for them. Children carried flowers to the manor gates. Women lit candles in Evelina's honor, whispering prayers of thanks. And Adrian, once cold, once untouchable, was seen carrying supplies into cottages, kneeling beside the sick, walking openly with his wife's hand in his. The Duke who had once sworn he could never love had been undone, remade, by the very woman he tried to dismiss. One evening, Evelina and Adrian returned to the chapel. It was quiet, filled with the glow of candles. Evelina traced her fingers over the stone where she had once knelt, broken. She remembered her vow: if not his heart, then I shall claim my dignity. She turned to Adrian, her eyes glimmering. "Do you know what this place means to me?" He stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "Tell me." "It was here I chose to fight. Here I chose to live, even when you swore your heart was closed to me." Her voice trembled. "And now, here I stand, not only with dignity, but with love I once thought impossible." His thumb brushed her tears away. "Evelina, I was a fool. I thought love was betrayal. I thought closing my heart made me strong. But you, God, you, taught me love is the only strength worth having." Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper, fuller, a seal not of desperation but of forever. Seasons turned. The plague waned. The scandal faded into history. What remained was story, whispered through drawing rooms, sung in ballads, murmured in cottages. The Duke who swore his Duchess would never have his heart. The Duchess who defied him, who knelt in mud, who bore the title of death and turned it into life. The love that remade them both. Months later, Evelina walked through the gardens, roses blooming under the warmth of spring. A child's laughter rang across the lawn. One of the seamstress's children, strong now, chasing butterflies with Alice. Evelina's hand pressed gently to her belly, where new life stirred within her. Her lips curved into a secret smile. Adrian approached, his eyes catching the sunlight, softened by a warmth she once thought him incapable of. He saw her hand at her stomach and froze, the realization dawning. "Evelina," his voice cracked. "Are we?" She nodded, tears glimmering. "Yes." For the first time in years, his composure shattered completely. He pulled her into his arms, laughter breaking through tears. "My God, you give me everything I never thought I could have. A wife, a heart, a family." She pressed her lips to his, her whisper fierce. "And you give me everything I never thought I could keep. A husband who loves me." On the day their child was born, the chapel bells tolled again, not for scandal, not for death, but for life. Villagers gathered outside the manor, their cheers rising like hymns. The Duke stood at the window, cradling his newborn with awe, his arm wrapped tight around Evelina. The man who once swore his heart was untouchable now wept openly, unashamed. And Evelina, once the Duchess abandoned on her wedding night, stood crowned in love, her dignity and her devotion bound together forever. In the quiet of their chamber, as dawn broke across the horizon, Adrian held Evelina close, their child sleeping between them. His lips brushed her temple as he whispered the vow he once denied her. "You will always have my heart, Evelina. Always." And this time, it was not a vow broken in bitterness. It was truth. If love had once broken you, would you still risk everything to embrace it again, if it meant finding the one who would fight for you until the end?